Welcome to another version of the Camo Matrix videocast. In this particular videocast, we'll be discussing the development of my visual light and UV light reflection test for hunting camo, and we're going to call it the Camo Matrix White and UV Light Reflection Test 1.0. And I'll be using this to explain. It's kind of a prequel to explain future tests that we're going to be doing. So this will be something that I reference in the future when I develop some results for some specific camo testing. So this will kind of give you an idea of how I'll be developing those numbers for the future. I'd like to say that I am no scientist, and there's probably some better ways to be able to do this. And I'm happy to welcome any of your constructive criticism or comments about how this testing was being done. So, send them on, and, we'll make some corrections in the future. But for now, this kind of gives us a basis to go off of. Now, the importance of highlighting a UV dead camo, simply because, deer and other animals, birds, they see that UV light, and, that's beneficial for how it is that they live. So deer are most active during those early morning, that early light, and also the late light, and so it's an advantage for them to see the UV spectrum, because that's what they can see. What gives them that really almost like a daylight type vision during those time frames when it's really hard for us to see. And as far as birds go, they use it for food identification. And also for their own identifications. If you were to look at a blackbird, it does have a little bit of an iridescence to them, but for us, they generally will look black, where they may have this different color spectrum in them to help them identify, one bird from the next. So, if you've got UV brightened camo, you're going to stand out to a deer more so than you would that a UV dead camo would. So I kind of went to the stores, and I wanted to take my UV light that I've got to be able to determine which camo has UV brighteners and which don't. And my example is like I went to a Cabela's here, and I walked around the camo area, and most of them, this is a hunting store. Most camo that was in there is UV dead. And you really have to shine it on some of these to really get any kind of reaction from the UV light. Although some of them would surprise you, and fleece things in particular. But specifically, there's you can see this video right here. The Sitka elevated fleece camo was it glowed under the UV light, which might make it shine a little bit more to a deer. Now it's kind of designed to be up in the sky where they're gonna see that UV light anyway, and so it's going to be blending into that, or you're going to be wearing this in a snowy type environment. But it's just something to be aware of. If you're going to wear it in a dark area, you might glow a little bit more than you would if you were wearing something else that was UV dead. Now, I did go into Walmart also, and you're getting a deal, but take a look at how the UV light just glows on each one of these things that are on the shelf. You're getting a great deal on camo, but when it really comes down to that intimate closeness, especially for bow hunters that we need, you might pop out a little bit more. If you're sitting 100 yards off and in a box blind, then it's not going to matter what you're wearing. But and we're also going to be getting some of this camo, and specifically some that I've got that have UV brighteners in them, and I really don't take much care in how I wash certain ones because I don't hunt in them. But we're going to see how these UV deadening sprays actually do perform on them. So that'd be something to watch for later. So there's a challenge to producing a testing environment that I can be consistent with, and I wanted to be consistent from fabric to fabric and from pattern to pattern so that I can produce some scalable results that will make more sense to everybody as they see them. And I needed to prevent light intensity that varies. So after a few tries, I developed this 1.0 test that I'm going to be sharing with you. And what I've done is I've built a box, and this box allows me to take a light at a certain point by placing it in a cradle and reflecting it into a location where I've got a light meter. And I'll reflect it off, specifically a 45-degree angle, so I can set things up kind of the same way every time, so that we can get very similar testing, a very similar testing environment that will produce results that we can kind of count on. Now, my light source, I've got a couple different things. I've got white light. I'm just referring to a rechargeable white flashlight, and this is something that I can charge to the same intensity each time, and I can use the same light. Also, and by UV, of course, I'm referring to this light, that light spectrum that deer can see that we can't. I am using a UV flashlight that's rechargeable. It's a 15-watt flashlight that's rechargeable to a full capacity, to where I can always start at the same place. And specifically, this particular one shines at 360 to 365 nanometers, which is like kind of that target range that we're looking for. And it'll help us identify a UV brightener in these camos. And I didn't want to use a black light because you can buy them and they're relatively low intensity. I wanted something that I could recharge and produce that portion of the spectrum that requires a little bit more power. And so this the UV light that I've got, and you'll see it a little bit later, is the one that I'll be using, that I can use consistently each time. Now, however, if you're trying to test for yourself, you can use these black lights to at least identify something that's going to glow. So, if you're wanting to not purchase a really expensive light for testing your own camo, then you can get one of these these black lights that will help you test it out. And the key thing for me was being rechargeable. And the test is simple. So I'm establishing a base reflection on both light sources, both the white light and the UV light. I'm doing a direct measurement. So I have to kind of generate these scales to figure out where the camo will lie. And so I've done a direct measurement on a mirror. So my 45-degree surface has a mirror on it, and I do a direct measurement with the light meter. And I'll also do a light measurement of no light. So I'll have a direct light and no light. So I have this dark measurement and a light measurement. Then I'll take a white, bright cotton t-shirt that's got brighteners in it, and I'll do a measurement with white light and with UV light, and then I'll take a black UV dead t-shirt and do a measurement of white and UV light, so they can give me this range of that spectrum of color. So we've got a spectrum of UV light and white light, and then we're also using the white bright fabric and the dark fabric as kind of our endpoints of where a camo might lie in. So I'll be able to reproduce this, and really every single time I begin a test, I will check my numbers and make sure they're all the same, so that I can be consistent in producing this percentage of reflection that these camo patterns will have. And once I do establish that my numbers are staying consistent with these base items that I've got, that black and that white fabric and the white light and the no light direct measurements, then it's time to test. And I'll test each one with a minimum of 3 measurements, so that I can be consistent, and so that if I'll take that average and we'll use that in our results. And those black and white fabrics give me that intensity, that high and low. And so now what I'll do is I'll take the camo and I'll test it and compare it to those numbers. So how does this help? Obviously if a camo is highly reflective in both white and UV light, then you might stand out a little bit more than you would. And especially in those critical hours where deer and other prey are most active, where that UV light's really shining. You may feel like that you're blending into the environment, but if you've got those white twigs and sticks on your camo and they're glowing, then it might pop out just a little bit more to what it is that you're waiting for to cross within your crosshairs, especially for bow hunters. Now for this introductory video, I ran 2 tests, and more are going to be on the way. So, stay tuned, because, more camo patterns are going to be tested, and we're going to, put these results in a place where we can kind of quantify, what those results are, and you can do a comparison for your own choices of what kind of camo you're going to be getting. Now, for me, I chose, for this initial test that we can show you how it's going to work, I have a mossy oak hoodie, and it's just a regular fleece-lined hoodie. You're dealing with, it's almost like it's got a cottony fabric. It's not going to be wind resistant. It's not going to be water resistant. But it's kind of it's just a regular kind of fabric. It's not going to be poly. It's not going to be spandex, and so that's one of our testing fabrics. And our other one is a real tree edge. This is mossy oak breakup country. This is going to be real tree edge, but it's a windproof and water resistant fabric. So it's a polyester, 88% polyester blend with, I think, 12% spandex. So it's got a little bit of stretch to it, but it's going to have that sheen to be wind resistant, or windproof and water resistant. So, before we do any kind of results, how do I capture the measurements? I'm using a light meter to capture an exposure value and so exposure value, or EV, can be converted to lumens or foot candles, but for my purposes, I'm simply just using that number to generate my scale. Now, to give you an idea, if I take this light meter out and I stick it out in the direct sunlight, I get a 17.5 EV measurement. So in my testing box, my direct flashlight gives it a 9.2, and so this is a direct light number. And then no light gives it a 2.3. This is on white light, and then direct UV light gives it a 3.2. And of course, no light source gives it a 2.3. So these are my top and bottom numbers that I'll be dealing with. And so the reflection value, based on which pattern I've got in there and what those numbers are, will give me a percentage scale above no light, and kind of give us a relationship to what direct light is. And so, our base numbers so white light, I'm taking my white t-shirt and I'm shining the white light directly at it. It gives you a reflection value of 4.7, which is 34% higher than no light. And then our black UV dead shirt gives us a measurement of 2.7, or 4.3% reflection. So the black is still going to have some reflection to it, but it's not nearly as much as what that white t-shirt is. Now with our UV light, and this is interesting, because when I shine the UV light at it, let me grab a sheet of paper here so I can show you. UV light, you can see how this glows. It makes things bright in here. I can see a reflection off of the camera of how it makes it glow. So when I shine that UV light at that white fabric, it made the whole area glow. So it gave me an EV of 4.7. And so that 4.7 is 267% higher than no light. And so therefore, it made the whole area glow. So it's really bright. So if you're wearing something that's got UV brighteners in it, think about how that's going to glow, to a deer, how it's going to pop out to them. And so the black t-shirt also had some of a UV reflection, and that's just because UV is still going to bounce off of things. It's still going to reflect, but it was only 11%. So compared to something that had UV brighteners in it, 267% versus 11%. 11% is probably going to be similar to the natural environment. I'm going to test some tree bark and some other things and see how that UV light bounces off of that. So with the camo results, and we're talking about white light. So when I take white light and I reflect it off of this mossy oak breakup country, it reflected 11.6% higher than no light. And then the Real Tree Edge polyester blend, so this one here reflected a 13% white light. And I think that some of that has to do with the fabric. So with that wind resistant and water resistant fabric, I think it's going to reflect a little bit more. I don't think that if they were both of the same fabric, they would probably be even closer. They'd probably be about the same. I mean, they're already still kind of about the same where they are now. Now, with the UV light, this fabric, this cottony, just flat fabric, reflected 22% of that light. And I'm going to show you, how some of these things stand out. And I'm going to turn it on, and you can see that these whiter colors in here, they do glow. So they're glowing. If I shine it on this area, they don't glow really at all. But when I get up to these white areas, they're going to glow. And so does a natural limb or branch glow? I don't think so. So this might pop you out. So with the UV light on the mossy oak, it gave a reflection of 22%. And that's from nothing. So that could be pretty close to what the natural environment is. But we're going to take this fabric from the Realtree Edge, wind resistant, water resistant fabric, and you can actually hear it. It's got that sound to it because it's got that protective coating on it. It reflected 33%. So an additional 11% more reflection. And if I shine it on here, you can see, that it's also going to have some UV reflection. So this is something to consider when you're looking at your camo. Does it really brighten up with that UV light on it? And these really are pretty UV dead. I'm going to show you some where they just really glow no matter how close this light is. So you take a look at how that UV light kind of glows on there, and we'll see how some of these compare in the future. But so 33%. So and I think again this has to do with a couple of things. One's going to be these brighter areas that are mixed into this pattern, and two is going to be that it's got that different type of fabric. This is that polyester, plastic fabric versus a more natural fiber. So if you can go with it, a more natural might be the way to go for really concealing yourself and being quiet too. The results, lightness in the pattern really has an impact on how much reflection it's going to have. It could be a factor in bright settings. If you're going to be hunting in, bright sun, then you may choose to be in a darker pattern and conceal yourself into a darker area. And so, and that fabric really has something to do with that UV reflection and that light reflection. So it might, the more plasticky it is, the more it might shine and stand out, in the right kind of light settings where deer are going to be picking up those UV and those reflections. That might be something that you want to consider when you're picking out your camo. So let's say UV brightened fabric or non-protected washes. I'll be doing some experiments here in the future. So with that particular mossy oak breakup country hoodie that I've got, that I take no consideration in how I wash it. It's washed in my regular wash where UV brighteners are known to be in those washing detergents. Then I've got some UV deadening sprays that we're going to test and see how that actually works on those, and we'll redo the test based after we've done that. So yeah, again, some glow on mossy oak and the Realtree that of that UV reflection, but we're going to see how these results are related to other camo patterns here in the future. So look for those tests. Make sure that you subscribe so that you can get those and be updated when I do those tests. And they're going to be more specific. So yeah, future testing is going to be done. We're going to be doing a deeper dive into each one of these patterns to where you can see them instead of watching me explain how I'm doing it. So they'll be a little bit shorter than this one, and they'll also be pretty targeted to each individual pattern. And then we'll take those results and we'll compare them to the other camos. So like I said, subscribe for them and watch for that information on the Camo Matrix website. It could help you out when you're in those really intimate settings where noise and that little bit of detection may really be at your advantage. So thanks for watching. We've got more on the way, and remember, the best camo is to remain still and be quiet. But if you like what you're in, that's even better.